Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to another episode of ILLN Opinion Plus, a series airing on Fridays. This is a space for our opinions, where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community is curious about. Today, we're joined by Pamela Fullerton, owner of Advocacy and Education Consulting. Welcome, Pamela. Thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on. Just from reading your bio and your website, I feel like we have a lot in common. So I'm excited to pick your brain today.
Of course.
Let's just jump right in. Throughout your career, it seems like you've dedicated a lot of your efforts to serving Black, Latinx, and other marginalized communities. Why is this so important to you?
Well, I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood, a very diverse school. And I luckily, had a Latina mother who never let me go anywhere. So I had to love something else, and that was books for me. So I was reading from a very young age, Gloria and Anzaldúa, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Maya Angelou, Langston Hughes, Alice Walker. I mean, I was reading about all these Black and Latinx authors and about, how being oppressed, how trauma that's happened to our people, to our communities, how that's impacted us. And I just felt moved to want to do something in my life to support efforts of advocacy.
I love that. So you read like all the greats, basically.
All the greats, yes.
What motivated you to create Advocacy and Education Consulting?
Well, I worked in the school system and in mental health systems for, nearly 20 years. And every time I had leadership that I thought was on the same page as me, how do we support the Latinx? How do we support the Black? How do we support the Indigenous community, the LGBTQ plus community? And at the end of the day, they never did anything. It was all talk and it was no action. And so my mentor, he said to me, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm still looking for that leader. And he goes, what about you? Why can't you be the leader? And I was like, oh, I see what you're doing there. And the pandemic actually, and seeing the continued and exacerbated injustices that took place during that time to our BIPOC community pushed me to say, yes, it's my turn to step up and offer the right type of educational and mental health services for our communities.
I love that. Because we do need to be our own leaders, right? Why do we have to wait for someone else to step up,
Yeah.
So what was the process like for you to build your own firm and create these workshops?
Well, I've been giving talks for many, many years with all the education and research that I do. People would say, hey, can you talk about diversity in higher education? Yeah, I could talk about that. Hey, can you talk about how to work with undocumented community? Yeah, I could talk about that. So I had this huge list of things that I've already been doing. And I said, why am I doing that for other people? I should just be doing it for myself. So that's really how I created the business. And I thought about what really I wanted to stand for. And I wanted to stand for advocacy, and I wanted to stand for education, because I do believe in the power of education, especially for minoritized populations. I believe that could be our key to help bring us to every single table that we need to be at all different industries and sectors of life. So that's how I came up with my name. And then that's how I started to create all the work that I do.
And why education specifically?
Well, when I was growing up in the system, I remember the school telling my mom, don't teach your children Spanish because it's hurting their English language acquisition. Mm-hmm. And my mom, she didn't know any better, first generation immigrant, just wanted to do the right thing. And so she stopped teaching us Spanish. And that was probably the beginning of when I started to see how the powers that be in education, the majority white men, white women who didn't live our lives and didn't understand our community, they were making decisions on behalf of us. And that was wrong. And so I know that has to change. We have to change that pendulum. We have to move it so that our voices are also heard in those industries. Latinx people, especially, we're going to college at such high rates, but we're not finishing. We're in the high school system and we have the highest dropout rates. That's not right. We are going to be the largest ethnic racial minority population in the United States. We need to be the ones that are educated, the ones that are at the doctor's offices, the lawyer's offices, owning the plumbing company, owning this, owning their mental health company. They need to be there, and they can't do that without having the proper education. So we got to get them there.
Mm-hmm. See, now I see why your mentor told you needed to lead us. You're so passionate when you speak. Like, I love to listen to you.
Thank you. Yeah, passion has always, that's what pushes me. It's my passion and my love for our communities.
Right. What are some of the more popular services that you offer?
Right now, it's in education. So I have schools coming to me saying, can you please help and support our children? Schools are underserved with mental health practitioners. It's always been the case. And even more so now with the added issues from the social unrest and the pandemic. So I'm doing like a mental health group for Black adolescent girls right now. Because they're seeing one of the highest suicide rates that we've seen in a long time in communities. And we have to stop that. And then I'm doing I work with 2 other schools going in there and supporting mental health needs. So right now, that's where I'm seeing the biggest need is in our school populations.
And is this mostly focused on like suburban schools, or do you work in the city as well? I'm sorry.
I also work for Northeastern Illinois University, which is a Hispanic serving institution, and I do graduate level classes for counselors and training. And so with that, I get to supervise clinicians as they're working with new clients for the first time. And most of our clients, because of our population, they tend to be people of color.
Right. What are some of the services or programs or workshops that you offer that you feel like more organizations should take advantage of?
So right now, we're seeing really high issues of depression and suicidal thoughts and behaviors at workplaces. And so large organizations like Amazon, Google, Bumblebee, they started to address this by maybe offering some additional days off or employee resources, but they're not changing the culture of the environment, right? Mental health is still stigmatized in the United States. It's stigmatized, especially among minoritized populations, because the history of mental health is just like the history of racism in this country. We did not take care of Black and Brown and Indigenous people in this country. We still not, but we're trying to make amends for that, right? And we're trying to bring more awareness that everybody has mental health. Everybody has issues. Everybody goes through things. And there are people that can support you, right? And these businesses have put a lot of pressure on their employees. And, I just think my grandma passed away the other day. And if I worked for a company, what would I get? 1 day to travel to the funeral, 1 day to be at the funeral, 1 day to get back, and then I'd have to go back to work. How does that ever give me time to grieve, right? Or process what's going on? We've had so much loss during the pandemic, and our companies and organizations aren't listening to that. They're not paying attention to the fact that people losing their jobs, people losing their loved ones, people losing, their homes, and they have food insecurity, and nobody's addressing that at the workplace. And so I think organizations and companies really need to provide better services and provide a better culture.
Do you feel like my condolences on your grandmother, by the way.
Thank you.
Do you feel like the pandemic kind of brought forward all these issues that were already existing, or do you think it created more problems?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
So the pandemic definitely highlighted the need for mental health, and people finally started to say, maybe I do need to go see a counselor or a social worker, right? Yeah. Maybe it's not so bad of a thing, right? So on one hand, that was great. On the other hand, now we have all these people finally deciding to go into, to get mental health services, and there's not enough of us. Yeah. Right. And so people are now waiting, or they're not getting the services, or they go and they have somebody who's not culturally competent. They go to a clinician, and the clinician doesn't understand what it means to be an immigrant. They don't understand what it means to have acculturation issues. They don't understand what it means that somebody's in fear of deportation, or they're fearing that their parents aren't going to be deported. They don't understand that they suffered through war or trauma in their country of origin. We've got to improve that system.
So, as a mental health counselor, what do you think are some of the biggest issues that Latinos specifically face when it comes to mental health?
Well, I actually took notes on this for you because I wanted to make sure I covered everything. I don't know
I
how much
love
time you're
it.
going to give me, but here we go. I'm going to run through this really fast. So, one, the pandemic has
Mhm,
hurt the Latinx community probably more, if not one of the most of all minoritized populations. So,
mhm.
the Pew Research did some polling and they found that for Latinx people, at least half of them have lost somebody that they love to the pandemic, to COVID. And then at least half have lost some kind of job or have some kind of food insecurity or how, income issue. That's a problem. That's a huge problem, right? So we've got that going on. The second thing is education. Latinx people were going to college at really high rates and it was steadily increasing. The pandemic has now dropped us to a point where we've lost almost 5 years of increased population going to college. So, I imagine that, and at least the Latinos that I work with, they told me I had to make sure I focus more on work because the other person in my household lost their job, or I had to focus on taking care of the kids because they were home now, right? They couldn't focus on education. So that is something we got to get back into. How do we support them so they can go back to school and finish? We also know domestic violence was an issue during the pandemic. It's always been an issue, but the pandemic exacerbated domestic violence. And there was a great study done by Alvarez Hernandez and company that looked at Spanish media and Spanish speaking media, and they found that they were sending messages through the Spanish speaking media about domestic violence. Some of them were good, like here are resources you can use, but some of them were not so good, like you need to leave, it's your responsibility to get up and leave, just leave your situation. And that's not how it works in a domestic violence situation. It's a lot more complex than that, right? So that was another issue. And then overall, we've just seen mental health decline, more depression, more anxiety, more suicidal thoughts.
Jesus, Pamela, I could talk to you all day. You have so much to say, and I want to hear you say it all. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have today.
No
Thank you for,
worries. I get it. I'll be happy to come back anytime you want.
oh, you'll be back, trust me. Thank you for talking with us today, and thank you for being our guest.
Thank you so much. And please make sure anybody listening, if you need support, you need help, you need services, I'm sure they'll give you my information. I am here to support you in the community. I wish you all well.
Join us next time for another episode. For more information about our discussion today, check out our web story on ILLatinonews.com and follow us on Twitter at ILLatinonews. I'm Annabelle Rocha with ILLN Opinion Plus. See you next time.